In a world of EMS podcasters, EMS Office Hours is the only live podcast bringing you the latest topics and opinions in EMS. Turn down your scanner and turn up your speakers as we join Jim Hoffman and Josh Knapp on their latest EMS podcasting journey.
Well, welcome to EMS Office Hours. I am Jim Hoffman.
Josh Knapp.
And I'm Dave Brenner.
Gentlemen, thank you for
Say that with authority, Dave.
I know that.
popping in today. So I do want to just remind people, please go like the show, like the page. It really does help us out when it comes to the stats. And be sure to go ahead and hit that like button below, please. The share button, and let other people know about the show. So I know we're on a time constraint today, and I think we can probably wrap it up pretty quick. I think try to keep it tight and talk about some of the things that I mentioned to you guys beforehand, and just want to get quick takes on each one of these three topics. Well, try to keep it quick because I know how we get a little crazy on this show. First one, I think, is I'm sure you guys have seen this on Facebook by now, where they're talking about they're going to lay off a bunch of people, and FDNY talking about laying off, what is it? I don't know, 400 EMTs and paramedics. I think a lot of these guys are ones that they kind of push through the academy to get them out there because when COVID was going on. And now I guess they don't have the money to keep them on. And, I'm seeing a lot of stuff on Facebook with other unions. I actually seen some of the newer EMTs who stepped forward to be interviewed with some of the, news agencies and some of the Facebook union people on Facebook and stuff like that to get their take on it as well. So just wondering where you guys, if you guys have heard anything, if you guys, just a quick opinion on it. And really, I mean, this, to me, it's like, this is I don't see how they can cut that many people, in a city that large, especially with what's going on. Forget about COVID, even now with protesting and stuff like that, the need for emergency services is just getting bigger, and I don't think it's just in New York. I think it's in a lot of places where the demand is getting, bigger because of, COVID and because of protestings and the increase in injuries and stuff that go on with that, So just wondering where you guys are kind of standing on that, if at all.
Well, there's a you're talking about, our collective city, my current city. And as if you read the papers, regardless of what version of the news that you're going for, the city is not handling itself very well lately. And so there's a big, and where I was going with that is the big part of this is that it's ineffectual budgeting that's causing this. The flip side is what you were just referring to, Jim, is that we're just growing. There's more of a need for EMS, as EMS is recognized as a real link in the care chain between emergency and hospital. So you're asking less people to do more work. You're breaking basically a contract, maybe not a legal contract, but an agreement that, you study this skill. You go out and you risk your life and you do this job and you will have a job. And basically they're saying, no, you're like everybody else. So, first in, first out.
Well, I think we have to consider, first of all, that there is a financial crisis. Okay, when the city shuts down, it doesn't collect taxes. It doesn't collect tolls. It continued to run trains. It didn't collect fares. There is a legitimate financial crisis from all of this, from COVID. And there is a legitimate shortfall in revenue, period. There's no doubt about it that the city has less money. And when you have less money, and you can't write your own money,
Right.
It would be really great if the federal government helped out with this, but I don't want to get into the political view with that. If the federal government helped out, that would help alleviate some of the problems.
Well, the question becomes too then, Dave, if that happens, I mean, I've seen some other states where the federal government has helped out and they don't put the money towards towards anything. I mean, I forget where it was, where they gave money for hazmat pay and stuff like that for people who were dealing with COVID, and the EMS personnel for that city got nothing of that money.
Right.
Yeah, and that
everybody else, they didn't give it to EMS.
And that brings us to politics. But I don't want to go down the political route. But I do want to go down. I want to go down to one more portion because I think it's important. Wow, my computer's talking at me a lot. The 400 EMTs that are being cut. And of course everybody is blaming de Blasio. I don't know that we can blame de Blasio for cutting 400 EMTs. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know. I don't think there was a memo from de Blasio that said cut 400 EMTs. I think there was a memo from de Blasio that went to multiple departments and said, you have to make cuts. And I want to be clear, this is what is in my head. The fire department cognizantly said, we're not going to cut a single firefighter, not a one, not a widget of one, all right? Because we fully expect the fires to be going crazy as they always have been, because we know that's our number one response. We fully do not believe that there's going to be an increased need for EMS in this thing called the second wave. We've got our surf's up, dude. We're ready for it because we're going to deploy our firefighters. And I believe it's a leverage issue. As soon as you start deploying the firefighters to EMS, there's going to be an outcry. There is going to be political response from the union outcry back to them saying, you were taking the firefighters, they're hating this. Fire department union has terrific leverage. They are terrific. Always have. And listen, as a union, they have done a terrific job for their people. Good for them. But somebody needs to look out for everybody. And when it gets sent to the fire department central, the commissioner is the one who says, I have to cut $15 million from my budget. I'll cut the EMS folks.
Right, right. Well, and keep in mind that EMS has been a two-sided thorn in the side of the fire department since they were adopted by the fire department.
I remember the green.
Oh, yeah.
Green and white.
Those are the days.
But
the Health and Hospital Corporation. Who would have thought EMS would have been part of the health system? But it is certainly a
crazy, illogical connection that, people who pick up sick people and bring them to the hospital would be somehow related to.
But we do work with the cops and with the fire department, all the emergency services.
We're the social workers that go out now.
And that as well.
Yeah.
But I think that you hit it spot on, Dave. It really came down, and they probably looked at some logical or in their minds logical, like saying, well, we have so many firefighters that came from the ranks of EMS and they're already paramedics or they're already EMTs. So we have
they're taking overtime like that.
Yeah.
I don't know any, that's not true. That's not true. I know a couple of fire guys who come back and work, per diem on the bus. I was about to say I don't know any, but it's not. There are more cops than there are firefighters, because they have to go back to their house and then deal with the shit of, oh, you were going for EMS and.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on from that. Like I said, we don't want to get political. Get very easy to get political with this thing. I just kind of want to get your take on it. I think we're kind of all on the same page with that. The one thing I will say, I do follow a guy on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have Twitter or not, but he's New York NYC EMS Watch. He used to do the old, EMS page that was like undercover. No one knows who this guy is. So he's got a good Twitter account. He used to talk about, the whole merging of, health and hospital, FDNY, and the whole thing. You will be assimilated type thing, But he had a tweet on here that he retweeted about, which I think is a good point. And maybe it's too simple. Like Dave was talking about, it's not just about just the EMS end of it. There's other things that are in play here, and but to me, sometimes breaking it simple, I don't know, makes sense. The tweet said the grass should be 10 feet tall in the park before we start laying off people who respond to emergencies. And that to me, that's always been the case with EMS, right? That we've always made less money, we've always got less of everything, but the other agencies and support structures in the government, never seem to be able to do without. But again, that could just be, I'm looking at it through one lens. I'm not looking at it through,
we're EMS centric. That's what we say.
Accountants and what they go through, if they're getting cut or what their shortages are and stuff like that. So,
Child Protective Services is devastated.
That's another, right. That's another thing. Exactly.
And who wants that? I don't want that.
Yeah. Just some things to, like I said, to kind of, kind of bring up there. So the next thing I want to talk about, guys, and this kind of ties into the third element, but did you guys see about the woman who was pronounced dead, and then she woke up in the funeral
just
home?
Before they were about to
they unzipped the body bag,
bomb her.
Yes. Yeah, she's 20 years old. Apparently, she's
disabled.
She had
CP. CP.
Yeah, right. She's
Cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy. Okay, so I don't know if you guys read the article I sent you or not. Do you ever think this could happen, like, to you? You take a step back. Okay, I'm a paramedic. I'm an EMT. Would you ever think that you can make a mistake like that?
You know what? I don't think we have all the info.
Yeah.
This is why
that's immediately what I thought too when I see the article. I'm thinking, okay, there is a piece missing here.
There is. When they said, and I don't like a lot of what got written there, but when in the article it mentions that the nurse said, I think I just saw her move. Mm-hmm. And the medic says, that's just from the medicine we gave her. Now, if they gave her medicine, I'm sure that if they gave her medicine, if they were medics working a code, they had an EKG.
Sure.
Right.
And the EKG was set up.
Right.
And my sense is somewhere along the way, they didn't read the EKG, or maybe they didn't give medicine. Maybe that's just somebody saying that the medic said it's from there, because I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe they gave a presentation to the physician that was slanted. I don't know. And the body was taken to the medical examiner. Now I'm thinking somebody there failed along the way to do a real check, because that's their job. I think they did she's dead.
And I said they did.
And I don't know.
They did, they worked her up for 30 minutes, and then it says given medical readings. I'm guessing their medical readings is, the end tidal, the pulse ox, the.
Well, that's EKG. If it was medics, right? If it were medics, that's what we're all going on, because what the article
they
said.
They say there was 4 medics. This is the thing that kills me, though, right? It says there was 4 medics there altogether.
Right. And but again, what is the typical response? 2 EMTs and 2 medics for
the thing is, they say 4 medics, but was it 4 medics, or was it 1 medic and 3 EMTs?
You know, I would
know?
love to hear from them, but they would be foolish to call up and start talking now.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't call us. That would be a huge mistake.
Yeah, I just find it. I'm going to tell. Listen, guys. In all honesty, I mean, there's been times where I've worked codes, and I pumped them full of every cardiac med, especially back in the day. High dose epi, and I'd work them up, and it would be there'd be asystole on the monitor, and we work them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and we'd pronounce, and I would linger on scene, and I've heard, I would hear these stories, and I would linger on scene and like make sure I didn't see the chest beating or the body moving. I didn't want this shit to happen to me, and I'd sit there and linger in the room with the body and write my paperwork and get a good 15 minutes of the paperwork in before I left.
How many times you work in arrest and you go from you get there, there's CPR in progress, you put the monitor on, it's asystole, you start your first round medication, and now you're into PEA.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would not pronounce PEA. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, I mean, listen, protocols are different, around the country where some people don't even work asystole. It's asystole, doesn't matter if the body's warm or otherwise, they just pronounce it.
Except for children.
Yeah, except for children. But, at first I heard the story, I'm thinking, oh, it's some old lady in a nursing home. Then I started reading further, and oh, it's a 20-year-old, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just don't feel like all the information, they focus on the fact that she was, pronounced, went to the nursing home or went to the funeral home, and they unzipped the body bag and she was looking up at them. Now that is probably every funeral home worker's, nightmare.
Well, the eyes are open a lot, but
yeah, but
they're not blinking,
waving at you, get me out of here. It's hot in here.
But so we don't have. What I would love to have is a copy of the EKG. I would like to see the pulse oximetry. I would like to see the end tidal CO2.
Yeah.
And I would like to, if they did a good job, if they did the right stuff, interestingly, when we complete a code in my system, we leave it. If we're going to quote, we leave everything in place. The tubes
everything
are
attached. Yeah. A lot of places do that.
What?
A lot of places do that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
That way everything's attached still.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if this patient was intubated when they opened it up. And it is either a good example of a miracle, because if all of that things happen even after we think we've done everything right and done our best to make sure when we stop that they're dead. Either this will be like the exception to the rule and they'll find out a reason for it or not, or this will be a great case to say, this is not what to do. Don't do what these folks did. This is how you document it. Look how nicely documented this could be done.
Yeah.
This shows that the end tidal CO2 was disconnected 5 minutes before pronouncement. What?
Right.
I don't know, but I'd like to know.
Yeah, everybody.
We're never gonna hear the real details.
I do find it, interesting with that because, it's one of those things where if you're a provider and you're reading this, I think most of us would be like, there's something missing here, or, like Dave said, if you look at everything and it's all done correctly, I mean, shit in this world happens. It might be that's just one of those things that, happened and it was out of whoever's control. I mean, but I find it hard to be with all those, 4 medics on scene and they worked them for 30 minutes and somehow none of them realized that she was still alive. I don't know, just odd to me. So,
well, nobody's been charged
right.
Right. So we're never going to find out unless somebody gets charged and clear the charges.
Right, exactly. I want to, and part of that I think is our, like David talking, being
And here's another scenario I want to just throw out there that would be just crazy, but you get on scene, they say, it's a terminal or somebody who is on the terminal scale and has a DNR, right?
Right.
But they can't produce the DNR. So what's our job? No DNR. We go ahead and resuscitate. Then at the end of resuscitation or getting close to the end of resuscitation, they turn around and say, oh, here's the DNR. And then, these guys may be stopped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where you got medical control, right? Because that's something I've been in those situations, and you want to respect family's wishes and patient wishes, and then you get on with medical control, and you give them, you paint that picture of what you have and what you've done, and I think 9 times out of 10 a doc will say, okay, you can stop.
Yeah. We had a similar situation where a guy was just placed into hospice. He didn't have a DNR. And most of this can be avoided on our end if people simply get trained not to dial 911. They have to, it has to be emphasized. You got an emergency, you call us at hospice, you call the doc, but don't call 911. If they're bleeding, something new, but
Yeah.
but so it was a hospice situation. The whole family was there. Somebody panicked and called 911. And the EMS came in and started working, and the family wanted them to stop, and it went back and forth, and they put medical control on, and the medical control doc said, nope, you continue doing CPR, you continue working the code. And finally, one of the family called the hospice organization. The hospice organization called medical control, and they worked things out there. There was probably a doctor-to-doctor discussion that occurred there. And it's tough. I mean, the best way to ensure that I'm not going to do CPR is don't call me. Seriously, don't call me.
Then people don't get instructed, when they're
they need to be
with DNRs, is just not to call, as soon as they stop breathing, and they just like to. Families panic. They don't know what to do.
Sure.
Isn't that a little bit of a paradox, though? We've worked for years to sort of bring up that idea that and not to misuse the term, but we're traveling doctors. We're bringing the medicine to you. And many times, how many times you've been called doc on a scene, and, you sort of let it ride. But the truth is we're not. And the truth is that we work within the realm of a physician's guidance. So we are not the last say in many of these things, and our protocols, where our protocols end, that's where online medical control starts. And I don't know if it's worthwhile to explain the complexities of that to the public, but there is that truth to what Dave is saying of, if you're in question, don't call.
Right. Yeah. Don't call 911. Not don't call the doc.
Yeah. Right. Don't call 911. Call 911 with expectations. Here are what the expectations are.
Yeah. So this kind of ties in a little bit to what I want to kind of wrap up today with, guys. And I saw a Facebook post. Guy was freaking bird just hit my window. Guy was starting medic school, and he's reading he got his textbook, got his medic textbook, and he's kind of perusing through the first few chapters or whatever, and he starts seeing about how they want everything in, talking about the A&P section, and talking about how they're looking for him to know stuff at the cellular level about DNA and all that stuff. And he's, questioning, to the group, how is this going to help me out in the field? How is knowing DNA and getting that down to that deep of a level is going to help him when it comes to, patient care and what we do as EMS providers.
Wait, your agency doesn't do DNA resequencing
No,
routinely?
we used to, but then I kept losing the schmear. So,
Our ambulance did have a CRISPR, Dave, but it was just the maintenance on it was horrendous. And you have to do the lab value checks every time you run it. It's hard.
yeah, people respond to this guy like, "Oh my God, yes, you have to know that. That is vital. You don't understand. Once you get down to that level, you'll understand this, you'll understand that." And listen, I am all for EMS education and furthering your education, furthering your understanding. But I think that, we have a very set amount of tools and responsibilities and medications that are available to us. And we should know that stuff backwards and forwards before we start getting into all this other stuff. I understand cellular levels, sodium, potassium pump, and all that stuff. Okay, that makes sense. But when you start getting down to DNA and people are going to actually justify that, I feel like those are the people that actually went to some, an A&P college level class to get ready for medical school, and now they have to justify the fact that that's why they went, and everybody else has to go too.
So you're getting away from the idea of 2 purple caps every 5 minutes, 1 yellow cap after 3 purple caps.
Yeah. Well,
And you're describing DNA as academic hazing.
That's the thing. There's so much content when you're starting out as a paramedic or even as an EMT, right? There's so much stuff getting thrown at you, and so much content you have to know just to pass your class
The citric cycle.
Exams. What's that?
The citric cycle, the Krebs cycle.
Yeah, you have to get through all that shit, and then to throw in all this other stuff. They're just trying to make the textbook bigger to make everyone, the people that write the textbooks and stuff sound smarter, or to
they sell them by the pound,
instructor that the instructor only has an hour for these lectures, an hour and a half for these lectures, and then he's got to try to somehow work in that shit on top of it. And like I said, I'm all for the education and furthering education in EMS and all. But when you talk about getting that ridiculous, you start going to calls after medic school, and you're going to these call after call where you're not ever using that shit, and you're like, why did they teach me that in medic school? I haven't used that once. I've been on the job now for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I've never had it come across to me that I have to know all these, nuances that I was forced to memorize in the book, and the instructor drew all these graphs on the board and all this shit. And I never used any of it, And like I said, understanding a certain amount of it is important for when you want to know how drugs are working and how the heart is working and stuff like that. But when you start getting so deep into the weeds, I think it just gets a little crazy.
I agree.
And I'm just wondering what you guys, your thought on it is. I don't know. Like when I watch these Facebook posts and they go on and on about it, I'm like, am I the only one that thinks that it's just not beneficial in the long run for us to know this type of stuff? Well, not the short run. The long run, yeah, it might be beneficial, but the short run, no, right?
So the person who if we could ask him, which unfortunately he's passed now, but if Dust Devil had his opinion, you would have to know that and photosynthesis, because it all combined. It's life, right?
Yeah, but the microbiology, drum beaters of EMS. You have to know microbiology. Oh, you'll use that on every call.
This was in the days before memes, if anybody is.
I had an argument with somebody once about that, about that whole deal with the microbiology stuff. I'm like, well, I'm sure it's great to know that stuff, but I don't really think you need to know it to go, deal with your run-of-the-mill chest pain, difficulty breather calls of no microbiology. You said, I wonder what's going on at the cellular level with this patient right now that'll help me figure out which one of the 2 medications I have in my box that I can actually give. Fucking doctors got to go back and look up shit when you're at the doctor's office. I'll be right back. They go in the back. They're in their friggin'
EDA.
their Grey's Anatomy book trying to figure
PDR,
it out.
physician's desk reference, right?
Yeah, and they come back. Okay, I just figured it out. Come on. I don't know. Like I said, listen, I have EMS educational, websites and content that I give people, but I try to focus it on the shit that they can use every day out in the field and what's going to help them pass exams, not, getting crazy.
Let's get good at the 99.5% of the stuff that we do. If we're really, really, really good at that, then we can Krebs cycle and DNA and yeah, sure. I agree.
I see. I think Trev here in the chat. I can't really make Trev.
You're somebody's hero there. Jim,
that's Mike. Yeah, I'm Matt's hero. Thanks, Matt. And I got Trev. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You talked about how medics should be equal to on RN and EMT should be equal to CNNs and stuff like that.
Well, one of the great conversations that started and then just got pushed out was during the expanse of the COVID pandemic, where, hey, it wasn't just New York City, Boston, and Philadelphia. It was the rest of the world.
Right.
That perhaps, wait a second for this, perhaps paramedics across the country should be trained to the same level with the same content. I don't know. That's
we have national standards.
National standards.
Right.
Imagine that. Imagine if there was some national test that you could take to test those standards. I mean, it would be, earth moving.
And they can't leave well enough alone either.
Well, that is a whole other idea.
Now they're changing the exams up. You can choose different choices, and they're going to have images.
Choice.
You're just cranky.
Pictures now.
The answer to this question: A, B, C, D, or E.
Right.
Or A and C, A, C, and B.
Right.
Yeah. None of the above.
Yeah. Choose as many of the correct answers that you think. Of these four choices, which two are the ones that you think belong to this patient? Or the my favorite one is they're going to talk about, they might have video as well and the questions.
I think if they do that, Jim, that the only appropriate response is, as long as they have a bonus round where you can pick up points, it'll be okay.
I can't wait. I can't wait till they start doing this. It's going to be great.
And now for the lightning round.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
I'm going to take what's behind door number 2.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's wrap it up there. I know we're on a little bit of a timeline. I appreciate you guys showing up. I appreciate everybody that joined us live, that made some comments in the chat. Please be sure to go ahead and just real quick, give me some likes and hearts or shares of the podcast so we can kind of get the word out there to other people. We've been doing this podcast now. Oh my God. I can't even tell you how many years we've been doing this, Josh. I want to say at least
I'm 10, not that old.
15.
Ignore the gray. That's just like
I gotta look. I always have to look back when I think about that. When I look back, my very first podcast I did solo with Brian Bledsoe, where I interviewed him. It was my very first podcast that I ever did. Back in the day. And I always got to look back to that to see what my original date was.
Now, Jim, if you wanted to go back to the beginning and listen to that first podcast with Dr. Bledsoe, where would you go?
Well, you go to emsofficehours.com. You can go to iTunes. It's there as well. But I don't want to listen to that because I sound even worse than I do now back then. Talk about not being comfortable talking on the radio or anything, back then. So, those were trying times. The Blog Talk Radio days and all that stuff, the trolls and the room and everything. That was good times.
Oh, it's good times.
Good times.
Absolutely.
But I will say this, Josh. I dare to say that this is still the longest running EMS podcast out there. The ones that were longer than us have dropped off, and we're still going.
And what do they say? It's not how fast you run the race. It's finishing and how long you run the race.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, again, guys, thanks. And thanks everybody in the chat. Thanks everyone that joined us that didn't chat, but I get pop-ups telling me you guys are here, so I really appreciate that. And that's it. All right, guys, that's it. I am Jim Hoffman.
Josh Knapp.
Dave Brenner.
All right, everybody, stay safe.